Hello friends, I am Vitaly Portnikov. On the eve of the meeting of NATO member countries' foreign ministers, Ukraine stated that it would not agree to any alternative security guarantees to full membership in NATO. This statement was made just as the foreign ministers of NATO member countries are gathering to discuss further efforts to assist Ukraine in its fight against Russian aggression. As is known, in recent months, there have been concerns that the new American administration may consider the refusal of Ukrainian NATO membership as an important condition for achieving a ceasefire in the Russian-Ukrainian war. At least this is what retired General Keith Kellogg, appointed by Trump as the representative for resolving the situation in the Russian-Ukrainian war, emphasized in his so-called plan. But we clearly understand that this ultimatum condition from Ukraine is unlikely to significantly influence the sentiments of the countries that are members of the North Atlantic Alliance. Firstly, even before Donald Trump's victory in the US presidential elections, there was no consensus among NATO member countries regarding Ukraine's accession to NATO, and there were countries that they emphasized that they would never agree to such a decision. Of course, first and foremost, these are the states whose leaders are oriented towards special relations with Russian President Vladimir Putin, such as, for example, Hungary. Secondly, it is absolutely clear that before the inauguration of the new American President Donald Trump, the alliance will not make any efforts that would radically change the situation, both in terms of security in Europe and in terms of what is happening on the fronts of the Russian-Ukrainian war. Practically all Western politicians are waiting to see what Donald Trump will actually do after his inauguration as President of the United States, and what his decisions will be if he, for example, becomes convinced that the Russian Federation is not going to agree to the plan that may be proposed by the new American administration. Thirdly, it should be understood that NATO member countries would generally not want a sharp confrontation with Trump in the situation related to security in Europe. After all, the new American president's negative attitude towards the North Atlantic Alliance is well known. Trump even considered withdrawing the US from NATO and threatened to do so if European countries did not increase their defense spending. The newly elected American president, as is known, views policy not in terms of the values of the civilized world, but in terms of benefit, at least for his own political career. And in this situation, NATO member countries would now like to prevent any even hypothetical confrontation with the new American administration. This is precisely related to the efforts of the new NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who has already met with Donald Trump and discussed issues of Euro-Atlantic cooperation with him. However, again, when Trump becomes the full-fledged President of the United States, he will reveal his true views on how this cooperation should develop during his second term. Fourthly, the question arises of how Ukraine can be admitted to NATO in a situation where the Russian-Ukrainian war continues. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky emphasizes that NATO member countries can invite Ukraine to the alliance, but to extend the action of Article 5 of the NATO founding treaty, which provides for mutual assistance in the event of aggression. Then, when it comes to the territory of our country controlled by the legitimate Ukrainian government. However, such a decision can only be made if the conflict is frozen and hostilities cease. And the likelihood of such a development is now when the Russian armed forces continue their offensive on Ukrainian territory and Russian missiles and drones appear over the heads of Ukrainians to the point of being practically zero. And it is unlikely that the situation will change after a leader appears in the White House. Therefore, the new statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine is important. But like many other high-level statements in Kyiv, it is declarative. The only thing it can really change now is to stop searching for any alternative security options for Ukraine from Western countries, to convince Western diplomacies that the focus should be on the option of Ukraine's Euro-Atlantic integration. However, in the West, they may believe that in such a situation, it is better not to seek any security options at all than to offer Ukraine membership in an organization which, according to some leaders of NATO member countries, could lead to a real Third World War with the use of nuclear weapons, to a direct conflict between nuclear Russia and the NATO bloc, which includes 3 nuclear states. And by the way, it is precisely on this fear of NATO regarding the possibility of nuclear war and the use of even strategic nuclear weapons and the destruction of major metropolises in Europe and North America, the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, speculates. And it must be said that he has achieved considerable success, not so much in the Russian-Ukrainian war as in exploiting this blackmail against Western countries. So in this situation, we will really have to wait to see how events in the war develop after the inauguration of the new American president, and what Donald Trump's decisions might be regarding the role of the United States in the North Atlantic Alliance and security guarantees for Ukraine within or outside the framework of the North Atlantic Alliance, and of course in terms of the interactions that will occur with Ukraine and European countries, in case European countries insist on further support for Ukraine, in a situation where the new administration in Washington will try to evade such support under any pretext in favor of Trump's foreign policy vision and his closest circle. But the fact that the only real mechanism of guarantees for Ukraine is NATO membership, and the absence of such membership promises a resurgence of the Russian-Ukrainian war, even if this phase suddenly ends, seems to me to be understood by everyone who has been observing the developments in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict over the last decade. Thank you, friends. Stay on this channel, subscribe to it, follow me on my social media, and to my Patreon channel, Buy Me a Coffee, which helps with this. These resources use the sponsorship feature on YouTube itself. Wishing you victories and peace. Good luck.